Hello, and welcome to Mornings with Joel, commercial real estate podcast, where we focus on rising stars and established players in commercial real estate and talk to them about how they are building legacies in today's marketplace. So I'd like to welcome all to Mornings with Joel, our CRE podcast, and we're very, very excited and delighted to have a good friend of mine join us today, Theo Bell, who's up in the DC area. What's up, Theo? How you doing?
What's going on, man? It's good to see you, Joel.
All right. So we are looking forward to doing some great things together. I couldn't think of a better person to have on here, so I wanted to go ahead and get you in here so we could talk a little bit about what's going on in your market and up there in DC. And you know, you have a pretty good grasp as to what's going on around the country. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. I guess one reason why I bring that up is because of your background. So why don't we go into a little bit of that? How did you even get started in the commercial real estate space?
That's a pretty good question. Originally, I'm from Dallas, Texas. That's where I went to high school, Skyline High School. Shout out to
Oh, you know what? That explains something. Walking around with that cowboy hat and those pictures. I get it now.
That's right. So those that see me in the hat, I get it honestly a couple of places. And I went to college at ERAU, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, to study aeronautics. Mm-hmm. That's what actually my background is in aeronautics. So I do a lot of things with, and as I get to tell you a little bit more about myself, you'll understand how I plan projects. I do everything with the ending in mind. So I just like all pilots, you take off and land, but you want to make sure that you understand everything that's going on in your flight. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I went to flight school in the Army. I was in the Army for 12 years. I was a Black Hawk pilot. Okay. So that explains a little bit more about my military background and my connection to the government. I got out in 1996 after 12 years in the military as a pilot. Served in the Gulf War, 2 tours in Iraq, and got immediately into government contracting. Well, a lot of folks ask, why didn't I just become a pilot? And actually, that's what I wanted to do. But during that time, it was shortly after deregulation. There were so many pilots on the market, and there was a contract that I thought I was suited for, and I went for it. 6 months later, I was awarded the contract. So that's how I got into government contracting. Okay. Worked on a few initiatives there at Fort Hood, Texas, which is my old background. Again, I did a lot of work with the Residential Community Initiative, where the government studied whether or not they should pretty much, privatize development of military housing. So instead of doing what they typically do is, budget and try to do it themselves through the Corps of Engineers or some other means, they actually ended up outsourcing it to private developers. During that work, I was contacted by a larger company, and at the time I had a small company, had about roughly 42 employees working for me as I developed contracts. And I was contacted by a larger firm to move out to Washington, D.C. to be their government affairs national account manager. So that's how I actually got into this market and got into what I'm doing now. At that time, I was, when I say doing now, government contracting. And during that time, I was working for major manufacturers like Wilson Art International, Formica Corporation, DuPont, and actually getting their products specified in those types of anything that was being built by the government, from military housing to ships, planes, passenger terminals, you name it. I was working mostly with engineers because that's my background. Then 9/11 hit and everybody pivoted. That kind of shifted everyone's priorities. And for me, it got me into infrastructure and specifically government buildings. So I worked for one of the first national broker contractors, a company by the name of Capital Craig, which was a small boutique firm doing real estate for the federal government, and basically government outsources their broker contractor activities to firms that can actually go out and find real estate, both land, buildings, for them to lease. Mm-hmm. And so I worked for that company for about 4 years on the contract. We did about 225 leases for GSA, just under 9 million square feet. So it was a pretty good contract, learned a lot, and we were actually approached to be sold. And at that time, I was looking to transition. So I ended up leaving the firm and doing some consulting for a larger firm. And that firm picked me up, a company called Equus, which is through a series of vendors purchased by DTZ. And now they're a part of the Cushman & Wakefield family. Okay. But prior to them purchasing the company, I was recruited by Newmark to start their government practice. So I used to work for a company called Newmark Knight Frank. I think it's still called that now. In 2008, That took me to that firm, and I was there. I started their government practice, and basically what that meant was that for agencies that were not GSA or did not want to work directly with GSA or want to have some type of their delegation of leases or construction done by someone other than GSA, I worked on the government practice side where we worked directly with the agencies as opposed to working for GSA. And so in that work, my primary client was FBI. And so I did a lot of work for the Program Project Management Unit of FBI as they started rolling out, looking at different sites to do the new headquarters. Because as you know, after 9/11, the security requirements changed for buildings. And so we had to get out of those old spaces and get into new spaces. And I worked directly for the team there that was looking at doing that.
Okay.
So that kind of took me around the country. You talk about, how I got into all these different markets. We did about 60 buildings. So that's a lot of buildings and a lot of markets. And so you work with national developers, regional developers. And as you know, real estate is regional business. So you get to meet pretty much everyone in the space, people who own land or the larger landowners in that area, get to negotiate contracts with them. And it's interesting when you're negotiating in places like Montana and Idaho, it's hard to put a 20-page or 40-page or 100-page GSA contract in front of them, of landowners and expect them to sign it. And a lot of those pretty much were 2-pagers. We did a lot of deals where we actually shook hands. We had to go back later on and do the paper it up. But a lot of that was done by just, the way that Middle America does business, which is, a handshake. So that was pretty interesting. And let's see how I get into what I'm doing now. So now I'm a developer. I develop clinics and hospitals for the VA. I have a contract right now to do, 2019. I think I bid on four projects, and I lost the first two, which was interesting. I learned a little bit about development and how it works because before I'd worked for other developers as a consultant. Here I am now with my own project and bidding, with my own money and my own team. And so I bid on projects in places that I was familiar with. Camp Dorado, Missouri. I bid on a project out in Montana. These were buildings that were going to be leased to the VA. And then I bid on one in Tyler, Texas. And then the last one in 2019, which was the largest one, I was awarded, which was the one I'm doing now in Loveland, Colorado, which is an 86,000 square foot facility that we're developing, that we broke ground, believe it or not, during COVID, during this whole pandemic. So that was a challenge, to be honest with you, something that you think is going to happen one way. And then, again, a pandemic is something that no one saw coming, and it totally affected the market and changed some things. But for me and my team, we were able to get it done. We're 50% complete on the project right now. We're scheduled to deliver it early, which is also good. We're given 30 months to deliver it. We're going to probably deliver it in about 24. So it's a pretty good project.
Yeah, that's exciting. So you've decided to focus on projects where you have the exit already in place. In this case with the VA, so it mitigates your risk factor to a large degree.
Yes, I talk about risk all the time when I'm talking to students, and the different ways that you have to mitigate risk, and how leverage and debt, the more leverage it is, the more riskier the project. So as the structure, how you structure the capital stack is also risky. All those things I talk about when I do some guest lecturing at Georgetown as well when I talk about GSA projects. So yes. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So no, it makes sense. So in a project like that, like you're describing out in Colorado, will you actually maintain the building and lease it kind of under a triple net type arrangement, or are you going to sell the building off to another investor?
That's the question, right? Can't really say right now, Joel.
Okay, all right.
But I'll tell you how that worked. The process of bidding a government project, obviously, it's full and open. And the unique thing about my project is that there's a Veterans First contracting program in place. So I'm a veteran, and under the VA and the FAA also has the same program. If there are two or more bidders in a project or any type of RLP, or request for lease proposal, there are two or more veteran-owned businesses, the government sets it aside. It's part of a Kingdomware award that basically says that if there's, what they're trying to do is give more projects to veterans and veteran-owned businesses. So instead of bidding about, against 30 or 40 different bidders, because these things are, highly, sought after, I'm down to there's only 2 or 3, maybe 4 guys like myself that are able to do that. So that increases my ability to win these projects. So, like I said, the one that we've won and we are under contract with is sitting on 13 acres. And we bid it with a gentleman who was actually doing a 300 square foot facility that he's doing right now, 300 acre facility, I'm sorry. So we got 13 acres of the 300 acres that we're doing for the VA just outside of the airport there. A gentleman by the name of Martin Lynn, who's a really good friend of mine now. He's very good at what he does. He's the largest landowner in that market, and we're partnered with him in doing that. So we bought the land. I bought the land and then used the land as a down payment to get the construction loan. And that was about $5 million purchase of the land and about $29 million construction loan. And then started the process. And then during COVID, there were so many changes that happened. The sterile processing was a part of the new agenda for the VA because of COVID. And there were some other changes in ads. So then they ended up increasing the project for just over $12 million of changes, which no one expected. So imagine having to go back to the bank and say, hey, we got a change order for $12 million. I need more money.
Yeah.
I didn't anticipate I did anticipate because I have a 20-year lease on this. So it's a 20-year firm term lease. I just anticipated the bank would say, sure, no problem, Theo. But they didn't. They said, yeah, we'll do it, but we need you to come up with some more equity. So again, having to come up with
the way it works.
Yes, absolutely. So I had to come up with another 15% of that equity. So I had to come up with another $1.8 million. So as you can probably imagine, having to go back to my source and say, hey, look, I know you gave me this amount of money, but now I need more. Yeah. And luckily I had a great relationship with him. And at that time, my equity investor had some other plans. So, long story short, he was able to get me the money. I was able to get the loan, and we continued with the notice to proceed and are still, getting everybody paid on the project. So that was one of the biggest challenges I've seen right now, was that these increase in construction costs right now. I know it's ridiculous right now, getting finished materials, lumber. I mean, when you name it, everything's ridiculous. I think lumber costs now are 360% of what they were when I started. So those are some of the challenges. And again, all the things that you as a developer, you have to plan for, or at least mitigate the risk for.
So let me ask you this, because you bring up a good point. Obviously, our relationship started off with my knowledge of you from more so as a realtor, and holding a commercial real estate license, and then to make that pivot. And I've seen it happen before, but what kind of was the impetus and went through your mind when you said, there's another opportunity here with this skill set that I have, these opportunities that I'm seeing? What was it really that made you make that jump? Because you have a lot of people that are in the real estate space and they enjoy it, they love it, but a lot don't make that jump. So what was it really in you that made you decide to do that?
That's another great question. So I'm a principal broker. I started my firm in 2011 after leaving Newmark, and became a development consultant, basically helping other developers go after these government projects, being their advisor, helping them with their lease as they start to put that together for the government. And so I did that for a series of companies, larger landowners in the area, and started to develop the skill set of going out and doing site selection work and doing all the other upfront work to actually, pursue a government lease. And decided that, I'm doing all this work, I'm putting the teams together, and, what does it take for me to make the jump from being a development consultant to an actual developer? And of course, money was the biggest challenge, credit, all the things that I needed to become that. I needed a partner, obviously, because I didn't have the type of background that to deliver one of these. So the long story short is that you need a partner that can check the boxes where you can't check the boxes. I had the background in government contracting. I had this wonderful opportunity to get set aside work. So after having a brokerage firm and being the managing partner of the principal partner and managing partner of a firm. I was able to buy my partner out. He decided that he wanted to go and do something else, and so that allowed me the opportunity to change the structure of the company and the operating agreement of the company to focus more on becoming a developer versus just doing principal, brokerage type work. So that's what I did, and then went through the certification process of becoming a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, which gave me the, again, in government contracting, you have to go through a series of accreditation type steps, getting involved with the strategic acquisition management sourcing website for the government, being able to check the boxes on all the different types of certifications that you need to be able to qualify for these types of opportunities. So I did that. It was a lot of work. Got a lot of good, legal advice and a lot of folks that were kind of encouraging me. But then again, the biggest step was to actually get that partner who would allow me the opportunity to use their credibility and their background as well as my own to go after, when I put my proposal together, that it showed that the government, that they weren't risking, it wasn't that much of a risk to award me a project. So that's really what I had to do to get into this position. And that's what works for me. I don't know what other folks do. I know some other guys that I know that have pivoted into the space that were brokers before, ended up into development, had, have similar stories where they saw an opportunity to pivot their firms from just, working as a development consultant or a principal broker into actual full-fledged development.
Right.
Everyone that I've talked to, and I did talk to several guys that before, because I was looking for partners, they all said the same thing. You need a partner who can check the boxes that you can't check, and can allow you to go after the equity and the debt that you need. So that's what I did.
No, I think that's a very valuable point, especially as minorities trying to do more and grow in this space. A lot of us don't have that generational wealth, that would have been available.
That's true.
You think about the story of Black Wall Street, which, they just had the 100-year anniversary this last week. One of the arguments was made that the generational wealth of the families that were destroyed during that period of time ended. So you have a lot of folks living today in poverty because that was stolen from them, because of the riot back during those years, or massacre, as the president says. So it's quite interesting, how you have to kind of build that back up. And one way of doing it is forming those alliances where, just like with any business, you want to look for areas where you're deficient. It's the old Henry Ford model, right? I don't have to know everything. I just have to know people who know everything, right? And then put those pieces together. So that's a very valuable point. Now, one thing I've noticed, Theo, that you've been able to do masterfully is come together and really build relationships. And one thing you mentioned to me before a few weeks ago is that, you see a lot of deals that are half-baked. And what I've noticed of your deals is that they're never half-baked. The team is always strong. The projects are solid. The locations are great. I mean, everything just lines up. So it's easy to say, yeah, this is a deal that we would certainly be interested in because of that. So you mentioned it, developing that skill set from your pilot days. How do you feel that really played into how you take your approach when it comes to putting deals together?
I tell you what, you're spot on with some of those questions. So the reason that I guess I'm able to do that is because, again, being a pilot, you have to plan your flight before, you have to take into consideration things like weather and, when you land the plane, where you're going to park, where you're going to, refuel, how the crew's going to eat, where they're going to stay overnight, and then be able to plan this, the flight for the next, for taking off and going to the next location. So I look at projects the same way. I look at pretty much who the players are, who the principal developers are going to be, how is it structured, if the market is where I can get them, get guys like you involved. So the market has to be a good market, something that's solid, and it can't be something that's not relative to what's happening right now in the market. And what a good point is looking at places that are high growth areas, high demand areas, and understanding that these are the type of projects that a person like Joel will look at versus some of the projects that I get. And I know that, they won't have a chance at all with you because, quite frankly, the market, there's not a market for the product. The asset is too risky. It's going to be very challenging to try to get money for that project. So, and then again, the people who are involved don't have any development experience.
Right.
So I usually have to talk them down off the ledge, like they think it's a great opportunity. But I said, but it's not a great opportunity if it's not a great real estate play. So it has to be a good real estate project before being, let's say, for example, in an opportunity zone. So I get a lot of those type of deals where everyone has an opportunity zone deal. They think it's the best deal ever, but it's not a good real estate play without being an opportunity zone. So how could it be the best deal ever?
Yeah.
So I kind of look at it that way, and I take that approach. And then I look at all the things that you're going to need to actually close it financially, because I know that you have to go through an underwriting process. I know that you have some very smart people on your team. And so I think about, what are the questions that these folks that Joel is going to take this project to, his risk team, what questions are they going to ask him? And I want to answer those questions before, so that you go in fully prepared and can meet any challenge.
Sure. Yeah. Very, very valid point. So it's quite interesting, but those are the things that you got to do. And the more prep work you do on the front end, the greater probability of deals getting closed on the back end.
Absolutely.
Just like with anything else, you don't, as you mentioned, jump in a plane and just hope it works out. You
never do that. So trust me, never do that.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's a bad approach. So
got
to make sure things work out. Let me ask this also. Your experience obviously is quite expansive. You've done a lot from the government standpoint and whatnot, which is also taking you into tertiary markets. What opportunities would you see in different tertiary markets around the country? Would it be solely government? Would you look for opportunities where the government has a foundational base, maybe a VA hospital or something like that, and then look to develop around it? I mean, what's your thoughts on situations like that?
Well, I'll answer it in two ways. For my niche, I would say because of the trend of the military winding down in some of the wars that we've been involved with. As you know, we're in conflicts all over the world. This administration has decided, depending on whatever your thought process is about this, to wind down those activities and bring our veterans home. And with that, you're going to have folks that are going to be getting out, just like I did, at different portions of their career. Either they fully finished up or they just want to do their first term and get out. And they're going to settle somewhere. So if you look at the way the VA looks at it, there's a heat map across the country of where those types of folks and activities are happening. And therein lies the opportunities. So if there's a heat map and there's, let's say, 100 markets, and you see that there's a trend of veterans getting out and staying in those markets, they're going to need healthcare. They're going to need benefits. So my product is a medical office building. So it's not just a hospital. It's also a place where you can actually, get help with your benefits. As you know, VA is the benefit side as well as the health side. And then, of course, they're both in a facility. So the facilities folks put those types of projects or those types of medical office buildings in markets like that are outside of places. You see a lot of them in California, in different parts of California, Florida, different cities in Florida, smaller markets, more where folks are retiring. But also in places like Montana and Missouri, there are some folks that like to go back home to places like Tyler, Texas, for example. Texas is a huge state. So instead of having to drive into big cities like, San Antonio and Dallas, they put these medical office buildings similar to what you see on the civilian side with some of the medical office products that are going into those markets. So they're close to hospitals. Anytime you see a new hospital going up, there's an opportunity there for a medical office building. And with the military, it's the same thing. So in the Denver market, where I'm building my facility, it's about 45 minutes to an hour north of the airport there in Denver. But they just completed a huge hospital project there. But there are plans for at least 4 or 5 CBOCs, which is community-based outpatient clinics, which is what I'm building.
Okay.
And there are a variety of different sizes, anywhere from 25,000 square feet up to as big as, I think one of them is planned for like 200,000 square feet. So these are just not clinics like you think. They're medical office buildings with 2 sides to them. The veteran side for they call patient type facilities and activities, as well as the benefit side. So,
okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. That's interesting.
Yeah,
You mentioned that Denver airport, because I was talking about tertiary markets. Denver certainly isn't tertiary, but that airport is in a tertiary area. It's
exactly.
so
It
far
is. If
out the
you've ever
city.
driven
Yeah,
there,
man.
right?
I'm like, where are we going? Right.
I
Yeah,
know.
that
But it's
airport
like
is up
that.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they
So
started building out there. So, it's kind of coming together and connecting it to the city. So,
they're trying. They're
yeah,
trying.
yeah, they're
And,
trying.
and
So,
and in some of these markets, you see, like I said, there are places that are growing. And as you know, Denver is one of the hottest markets in the country right now,
mhm.
where folks are leaving places like California and moving into areas of states like Arizona and
Mhm.
those cities and smaller, more suburban type areas. So suburban is kind of a misnomer in some cases because there's this expansion going into these areas, and you're seeing more of the type of amenities or city type amenities in these markets that were
Mhm.
before rural and suburban. They're actually getting more city like. So I see that trend happening as well.
Yeah.
And then as long as you have folks coming back, there's going to be that housing need. So
Mhm.
when you see multifamily housing going up, a lot of it going up, you're going to probably need more amenities. So there's going to be a need for hospitals. Obviously, the military goes where most of the country goes, but they want to be in their little niche market because they like to be around places where they can get back to the bases or to places they're familiar with. So you're going to see that.
Yeah.
I'm in Columbia, Maryland, which is not too far from Fort Meade. It's
Mhm.
it's far enough where I'm not in the military community, but it's close enough to where if I need something, I can get to the base.
Right. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Hmm.
Now, I just thought about something because in addition to the military side of it, I always think of the market holistically. What are the opportunities out there? And you mentioned about these facilities, and the question always in the back of my mind is, what do you do with these malls? These large malls, they're sprawling. A lot of them are in deep, deep trouble. And I'm wondering, would there possibly be, and this just kind of came to my mind while we're sitting here talking, possibly of the application of using this type of facility more as a retrofitting of a mall as opposed to building a new facility in some of these, more outlying areas. Do you think there's any possibilities of something like that taking place?
Yes. In fact, when I go into a market, I use brokers, local brokers in those markets. And what they'll do is they'll tell me about the mall situation or some large shopping center that sits in the delineated area that the government's looking for,
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, look, this might be an opportunity to the landowner or the mall owner to work with you to bring the VA in. And so I'll look at things like, what types of activities are happening around it, because I know the government's going to be concerned about that. That you can't locate what I build near, less than a mile and a half or somewhere a half a mile from a liquor store or any type of gun ranges or anything like that. So the government kind of, shawns on that. As far as on the commercial side, I'm seeing activity in places like the malls where shopping centers are going in.
Mm-hmm.
So I just saw a Lidl go into a mall that was the space was vacated by J.C. Penney, and now there's a Lidl store going in there.
Okay.
And again, Lidl has pivoted. I used to do some site selection work for Lidl stores. They've pivoted because they've kind of changed how they're going to the market. And they've looked at the market and said, hey, maybe we need a smaller footprint. Maybe we need to be in a denser area. And so you've seen a change in their site selection process as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because, you wonder that there's so much real estate in these malls. Amazon can't turn them all into distribution hubs, right? I mean,
That's right.
There's got to be another play.
That's right.
For these malls. So you kind of wonder about that. And, with the government being obviously one of the biggest tenants in the country, there might be an opportunity there. So just something I thought about, from that standpoint.
Sure.
There's another project that I want to talk to you about. We could get more in the nitty gritty offline, but, a multifamily redevelopment project we're looking at in Tennessee. And one of the other sponsors in the deal is adamant about having VA facilities on the site because there's a huge lake there, and there's some other areas where you can either build a new building, or you could build some type of facility like you're talking about, or maybe convert one of the apartment buildings, that's on the site into a VA facility. Without getting into specifics, what do you think about a project like that? What would be a good play for a situation like that?
And this is in what part of the country again?
Tennessee.
So Tennessee. So there's some pretty large military facilities in Tennessee. Fort Campbell is one that comes to mind, near Kentucky, Tennessee border. There's a couple of other ones down near Nashville. So I could see that, if there is a play, and I know that there are plans to put facilities there, it's just a matter of knowing when they're going to be coming to market. So if he needs to find out a little bit more information, I would ask him to contact the VA to see what their plans are and when that process RLP is going to come out.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we'll get into more detail about that and specifics as to which area and the rest. But I'm thinking about that because one big issue, even here in the market where I'm at, is VA housing. VA housing is always an area where there seems to be a deficiency, and people focus on Section 8, but they don't really focus on VA housing. Why do you think that is? Any thoughts on that? Being a former military guy yourself.
So VA housing used to be a thing where folks in the military communities would want to live off base in more of a structured environment. Now, I guess in the last 10 years or so, maybe even more, the move has been to live among the community. So there's no real push or need to move into like a whole community of just veterans. Most folks are living in communities that have all the amenities and not just those that are associated with the base. So you're starting to see that trend is continuing. So I've actually had several projects that I've been involved with that started out, being VA housing and ended up being something else.
Gotcha.
Just the demand is not there like it used to be. So that's one of the reasons.
But you can still do VA housing similar to what's done with affordable housing, where you might take a housing project and incorporate those people as a percentage of the overall housing for a market rate development, let's say, and then you have a portion that's for VA. I mean, that's still being done, obviously.
That's still being done, yes. Like I said, they used to be done a lot more frequently. You see more projects that, at least I would see more projects that had the veteran housing component. There may be a trend for it to start again because, again, as wars kind of wind down and folks start coming back, there is a need for that type of product. So you may see that trend happen again.
Okay. Gotcha. Even though we know there'll probably be some other event pop up. So it's just a matter of time, right?
Just a matter of time.
There's always something. Yeah.
Right.
It's just the way it is. So, all right. Well, that's exciting. So as you look at the overall market, just one thing I wanted to highlight again as we, start to wind down today is your approach. I think that's something that really needs to be highlighted. You don't take kind of a shotgun approach. You're very laser specific. You always begin with the end in mind, and you kind of map out your progressions as you go along to make sure all the pieces line up. And it's a beautiful skill set that you put together. So, one of the reasons why we do this podcast is for the next generation, of developers and other folks that are coming along. What would you tell them as they try to step into the marketplace and learn from those skills, whether it's becoming a developer, whether it's becoming a commercial real estate agent? What are your thoughts in that regard?
Well, the first thing I would say, and I tell everyone this, learn real estate. Okay, so you can start by getting a license and understanding that, real estate works a certain way. It's an investment, similar to other investments that are out there, but it works a specific way. So I tell them to go ahead and spend the time to take the classes, the real classes, not just the ones that, that are fly by night or whatever. Become a licensed real estate salesperson, and then work your way into brokerage and understanding how it works and what your responsibilities are to the public. And then from there, decide on whether or not you want to move to the next step to where you're actually an owner of land or an investor in land. And so those are other steps that you'd have to take. But it all starts with understanding, and just like anything else, become a pilot, you got to get a pilot's license. Okay. You can't just, jump in a plane and start trying to fly. Right. It's not a car. It's a plane. There's risk associated with it. So the same thing with real estate. Yeah. There's risk associated with it. So you just don't go out and try to do something that you don't, have the education or the background in. And then get with folks that are more experienced, get a mentor. I would tell them first thing is, the second thing is to get a mentor, someone that actually can kind of teach them the things that they don't know that aren't in the books about real estate. Things like, the market and understanding how to find a good product, find a good opportunity for development.
Yeah,
I tell a
those
lot
are
of those.
intangibles.
Yeah, those
got.
are,
What's a good deal? What's a bad deal? Right.
right.
All deals are not good deals.
Exactly. And I try to tell them just to do some practical things. When you're driving down the street, and you're at a four-way intersection, take a look at what's at the intersection. You typically will see a CVS, some type of gas station or a convenience store, a Rite Aid or a Walmart or a hotel. And then you go to the next light and see what you see. And as you'll start to pick up at signalized intersections, there are a lot of product that are very good investments. So that's a way to look at it. So, and then if you see something that's being developed and they're going to be signalized corners, there to try to find out what's going on with the land, who owns it, and see if you can somehow figure out a way to get involved in that deal. So those are very practical things that you can do, you don't think about. But as you start to talk to real estate, not just real estate agents, but people who are looking for real estate investments, developers that have national programs in place, they're looking for those signalized corners. They're looking for those new developments that are going up. They're looking for opportunities to get into places that other people aren't in yet. So those are some of the things that you want to look for, and they don't teach you that, but you should know that as you start to develop your skill set, because this is how you get into development, is understanding how to get into deals early.
Yeah, exactly right about that. So that's really what it's all about, is learning how to put those pieces together and go from there. So good job. Again, Theo, you've done a great job over the years in being able to do that, and not just running into a deal blindly, but making sure that it makes sense, and always beginning with the end in mind. We always heard it say, it's kind of cliche-ish, that you make money in real estate when you buy it, not when you sell it. And it's really true, because it's all about your basis. What's your basis going in? And if your basis is right going in, your exit will be fine. You don't have to worry about it. So that's a very, very valuable part of the story. So, we certainly appreciate that. Uriah, did you have any questions that you wanted to present to Theo before we move on to anything else here? If you're still with us there.
Hey, Mr. Bell, thank you. This is great information. So I know you can go on and add some additional knowledge to what you've already dropped. So I truly appreciate the information that you shared. One of the things that I kind of made a mental note was around something you mentioned as it relates to mitigating risk. And I know you may mention that as you assess capital stack, you want to ensure that you do risk mitigation there. I was wondering if you can expound on that a little bit. When you say risk mitigation, even as it pertains to the capital stack, I was curious if you can expound on that a little bit more.
Sure. So there's different parts of the capital stack, and this is really in Joel, who actually structures deals, would be able to expound a little bit more. But in the capital stack, you have the way that folks are going to be paid back. So when you're looking at risk from who's going to be paid first, who's going to be paid second. Usually the guy who has equity, the guy who basically is giving you the cash, is the guy who's going to be paid last. And so that's what's going to be at risk. And if you go to an investor, the investor is going to be looking at that as well. So they want to be in a position where the bank is obviously going to be paid first, because that's what, in order for them to lend you the money, they want to be in that first position. And then there's some type of, you may have some type of mezzanine or some type of money that's available to you, that's going to be lent to you in order to get into the deal, and they want to be paid. And then you have someone that's obviously your own money or someone else's money that you're using. So all those folks are going to have to be paid back when you start servicing the debt or the loan. And so that's where the risk, again, a person like myself, I'm going to give you money. I want to be as close as possible to the second person that's going to be paid, which I'm obviously going to be paid the bank. If I can be first, I'd rather do that, but I know that I can't because of the type of project that you're working on. So the further back I am in getting paid, the more risk that I'm taking on. And that's how you have to look at it from your investor standpoint.
Got it. And does it make sense to, and I don't know if I'm using the correct terminology, but would it make sense to amortize the repayment to the investors over a certain time period, let's say 5 years? so that it enables you to have more of a time horizon to ensure that you're able to service back to your equity investors?
It depends on if they give you that option, to be honest with you. Because a lot of times, like my investor told me, he's like, Theo, I don't buy green bananas. So that just lets you know right away that he's not going to be in it for the long haul. He wanted his money back in 2 years. And luckily for me, I was able to pay him back in less than 2 years. And I was put in a position where I could do that. So for any type of equity out here, you're going to pay a premium if they don't have the relationship with you. So in most cases, if you have a relationship, you can be looking to pay some equity is going to cost you 20 to 25%, to be honest with you. And that's how much, that's just the cost of getting into a project. Because again, if you need $1 million, you don't have $1 million, I have $1 million, I'm going to charge you for that. So you can be looking to pay me back. And I'll say, look, I want my money back in 2 years. So you have to work to get my money back to me in 2 years. Otherwise, I'm going to put some type of clauses and penalties in the agreement that's going to charge you a fee for every time, every month that you miss, or it's going to be a premium on top of that. Most investors are going to do that to you, especially those that are sophisticated. They're not just going to allow you to just use their money. And again, the smaller amount of money is going to cost you more. So let's say you need $100,000. Well, you can be paying anywhere from 35% to 50% for that money. And I know these numbers are mind blowing, but that's the market because you need the money. So if you need the money, you're going to be looking to pay whatever that equity investor is going to charge you. So hopefully you're in a position where you have a good relationship and you can pay, 15% is not bad for equity, but then get into a position where you can pay them back quicker. And so for my second investor, I was able to get that charge down from a certain percentage to less than about a third of that. So I was below 10% on my equity for the second portion, but at the same time, I had to give up something. So you have to always figure out what you're giving up in order to get the better position on the equity. Hopefully that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I wanted to also ask, do you have any experience working with economic development programs and or equity sources, whether that's working with different counties or different cities? Do you have any experience in that? And wonder if you can share some of your insights there.
Sure. So I work closely with Prince George's County in Maryland. I work with their business development group pretty closely. And I've been doing that for about 15 years or so, actually, maybe even more than that. But there are things like low-income housing tax credits, new market tax credits, and then various other programs that the different counties will have to help you in putting together your capital stack. But I always tell folks that none of that matters if it's not a good real estate play. If you can get into a position where you can get someone, if it's a good real estate play, to say, hey, look, I will write you a letter and I will finance the whole thing, then everyone's going to line up to try to get involved with that deal because you've already mitigated the risk by getting someone like, let's say, a Prudential, which is an insurance company, or Union Money to be involved in the deal. The more that type of money you can get involved in your deal and commit it, the better off you're going to be with some of the other sources of income that you're going to get from the counties and the cities.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate that input there. One thing I was going to add about the equity part of it is it really depends on how you raise your money. So for an example, if you, let's say, raised a discretionary fund, then you could actually promise those people a fixed rate of return and use their money to do what you want to do. So you might say, hey, we're paying 8%, 9%, 10%, whatever the amount of money is. And then you could deploy that capital. And as long as you pay back that 8, 9, 10%, 12%, whatever it is, they're satisfied from that standpoint. But as Theo was mentioning, once you get into a more sophisticated type of deal and you're raising money from people who know what they're doing and they know what the returns are on that deal, it's going to be less discretionary. They're going to want to know, what the money is going in for, what the returns are going to be. They're going to want to look at those pro formas and everything else, and they're going to want a piece of the action. So at that point, those returns back to the investors go to those areas where, like Theo was talking about, where you might be giving back large percentages of the deal, but it's okay because it gets you into a deal where you're making a very large percentage as well. So it kind of balances out. So it really depends on how you raise that capital. If you're just raising it through Betty and Bob and, their 401k or IRA, that's one thing. They'll be happy with a 8% coupon and just kind of go from there. But, you're talking about one of these major Wall Street funds, you ain't going to get away with that. So
not at all.
It's not going to happen. So, yeah. So that's kind of how it goes. So,
yeah. I like the way that you said that, Joel, because you have to be realistic in your approach. Mm-hmm. Remember, we are, I don't know how many people, but people of color you typically have access to those types of opportunities. Joel's in a great position because he's been empowered to loan large amounts of money to all types of companies, not just companies that are, what they call diversified companies, where you have, a woman or someone that's, African-American or Latino, mm-hmm. or in some cases, other ethnicities. We typically have not had those types of opportunities to get those laws strong, nor have we had those types of projects that would command the type of money that we're looking for. So for me, I needed a large amount of money to do what I'm doing. Obviously, I got the federal government behind me as a tenant, mm-hmm. but I still needed the money. And so I have to go out and raise that money, raise that capital. And so a lot of times you have to understand that, even though you are in a position like that, the access to those types of folks aren't typically available to people of color. Sometimes you don't get it from the local bank what you need. You have to go to equity sources, private families and offices to get the money that you need to qualify for those loans. So, and I know Joe has, some things to add to that, but that's typically what happens in those types of, when you have those type of opportunities.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where we even started the conversation. That's a big part of it, because a lot of those relationships come from, being in the same golf club or being in the same country club or going to the private academy, or some type of charter school, or, just places where your typical minority doesn't get to go, and it's generally because they don't have the money, right? They don't have that discretionary money to join a golf club or to do this or do that. So you get locked out from the very beginning. I know one thing I used to talk about in the, just from a financial literacy standpoint, because I've done a lot with minorities and financial literacy over the years. And one thing that was statistically true is that the majority of white families were buying their second home at the same point when the majority of Black families were buying their first. So you're always behind. And if you look at the fact that the majority of people make their most money from an individual standpoint when they buy or sell a house, or when they sell a house, you get it from selling a house or the death of a loved one. That's generally where the bulk of an American family makes their money, right? So if you're not selling your house until you're a generation behind another ethnic group, because they've already had their first house and sold that house, and they've already invested the money from that first house in their 20s or their late 20s, early 30s, then you're always going to be behind. Right. You're always going to be running behind. Right. It's difficult to catch up. So, you have to think of, all right, like you said, learn real estate, right? Why do you have to be 10 years behind other ethnic groups? Why can't you be buying your first house in your 20s too? Why you have to wait until later? Maybe it means don't buy that luxury automobile right now and things that depreciate, right? Invest in things that appreciate. And I can go on and on. I can get on a soapbox about this, but that's one of the big things. And so because of being locked out of that, Theo, this is one thing I would really like to get you on board with. Myself and a few others are putting together, if you will, a report card of such, where we're actually reporting on companies that have promised to make funds available to minority developers, and if they're actually doing it. Right. I always give the example of Haiti, where there were tremendous capital, offered to Haiti. There were concerts, there was all this stuff. And then at the end of the day, how much of that money actually made it to Haiti, right?
Zero.
Yeah, it's
very little.
Right, yeah, exactly. So it's one thing to pledge it, is another thing to actually deliver, right? And so having, people with the access that we have and being in this space and having some type of, for lack of a better word, report card, if you will, where you can actually report on that and say, hey, these are the companies that are doing it. These are the ones that have done it, and make those resources available for the minorities that are trying to do stuff as well, I think will be very, very valuable. So that's kind of the path we're going down. And, like you said, I'm extremely busy, but I think it's important to kind of make this happen as well. So
I'm on board with that. And again, the thing about people who have money. So let's say, for example, I'm in a position where I can invest. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that money. I get tons of people coming at me all the time wanting me to invest in things.
Mm-hmm.
So to be very, I have to monitor my time. I have to look at every project the way that I look at any project I'm going to invest in. I look at it, even though it's not my project, I'm going to be giving money to that project. So I can only imagine folks like, Robert Smith or Oprah Winfrey or, some of the ball players that I know that have that type of money. They're probably inundated with people too.
Yeah.
And so there's only so much equity to go around,
Mm-hmm.
but you need equity to do these deals. So how do you get it? So you have to have networks outside of African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you get it done. And so a lot of times, like you say, you have to have these relationships. And for me, just a short story, I'm in between. So I know enough. I've been in the industry long enough to where I've done a lot of business with a lot of folks' dads and moms and aunts and uncles. Okay, so now they're the ones that have the money and they need the type of intellectual and access to networks that I have and expertise that I have. So as you start to build your expertise in this business, you're going to be in between too. So now the same people that you did business with their dad and their mom, the kids are coming to you because they trust you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about that relative trust that is formed by being a good person, doing good things, not bad things, and being someone that you can be that's reliable. So you'll see that as and then, again, it doesn't have to be that far away. It could be church members.
Mm-hmm.
I get deals come from pastors and pastors' friends and folks that I've worked on campaigns for. I've worked on campaigns for guys who have been in local politics. And so when they need some real estate expertise, I'm the guy that they call or come to. Title companies, what I'm saying, I guess, in a nutshell, is that as you start to build your expertise, you're going to start working with folks who have family members who need people that are reliable and trustworthy to advise and consult with. And that will be your opportunity to be closer to those families. And as you start to do more deals with them and make them money, then you'll have an opportunity for them to invest with you or co-invest with you on your own deals.
Yeah, yeah. And I actually like you bringing that out because there's I don't want to get into that because that's a whole nother issue. But it doesn't have to be. It's not black versus white, right?
No, it's not.
It's about diversity. It's about collectiveness, and it's about raising all boats.
That's correct.
So it's not like we're trying to just say, well, this is a black thing. I can't do business with no white folks, and we got to do this alone. Nobody's trying to do that,
right?
But the thing about it is that diversity works because it brings a different perspective to deals and opportunities. And so having a diverse portfolio or diverse people that you work with can help you get to that next level. And as you're right, nobody can do this in a vacuum, especially these multi-million dollar deals, $120, $200 million deals. You need partners, you need assistants, you need people to support you. And a lot of the people with that talent, because a lot of us are first generation in doing this, are people of other ethnic races. And we got to pull them in, because that expertise is valuable to us. But everybody wins in a case like that. So
that's correct.
It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing that we can all benefit from. So, it's just the excitement is having access to the door.
That's right.
And the door being open because it wasn't always open.
And being a person who is willing to network. Okay. And
Right.
I can't stress that enough that what you just said needs to be expounded upon and it needs to be driven home.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot do this with just your people. Like, for example, for me, I started out in a small boutique firm that was owned by an African American that had two white male partners. And then that relationship expounded because we were good at what we did. Again, we did 225 leases, just under 9 million square feet, never a protest. We got a reputation of being a solid company with good, we had a good background, good pedigrees. We did the right thing and folks came to us with their deals. That's how you want to work into this market.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You don't want to just say, I just want to do, I only want to work with my people, or I want to do this with these people, or it's just cutting yourself off from deals when you think like that.
Yeah.
You have to be able to open yourself up to opportunities to work with people who who appreciate your work ethic,
Mm-hmm.
and your ability to get deals done. That's going to open you up to, I can tell you a good short story. I do a lot of work in the Asian market. And so a lot of folks from other countries are looking to do deals in America. So this one particular person ended up being an asset man. He was an asset manager from Hyundai. And he was calling one of the organizations I was affiliated with, and no one was returning his call. And so my mentor at the time said, Theo, could you call this guy back? No one's returning his call, and he wants to buy GSA lease properties. So I called him. I didn't know what he did. I just got on the phone with him, started talking to him, started telling him about what I knew. And next thing you know, he's like, can I come to, he was in Korea. He said, can I come to America and meet with you? So this guy flew all the way to America just to meet with me because I spent the time and I talked to him through, and I teach him, I taught him and he understood, how to get involved in this market, who the players were, how to go about looking for a good deal, lease term and things like that. And he knew a little bit, but now that he had an American, he could go back to his bosses in his country and say, hey, look, I met with this guy, Theo Bell. And again, it had nothing to do with my color. Yeah. It had to do with the fact that I spent the time. I was good at what I did. I understood what the questions he was asking. I was able, and I was accessible to him. So when we had questions in his country, I would stay up late. We take a phone call. I would talk to his folks, and it didn't matter. He spoke in broken English. He understood what I was saying, and I didn't have to work through an interpreter or anything like that. Well, that deal ended up becoming a bigger deal for me. So I did my first deal with the company I'm working with now out in Vegas, because the same guy brought his chairman and 4 other of his colleagues, and they flew in, and here I am at the table with his whole team. So I didn't even know he was that strong of a participant at his team. And here he is now. He has his boss and probably his boss's boss, and they are looking to do this deal with me. It's an 80,000 square foot building. And at that time, I was a development consultant, but I was now brokering the deal. Right. So again, being open and again, your deal might not come from someone that you think is going to be, your color or your not even an American. But if you just continue to work hard, learn your craft, spend the time and become sort of a recognized authority at what you do, deals will come your way, and they'll come from all over. Yeah. So very good point. Very good point. Theo, I want to wrap up on emphasizing 2 things that you said that I think is very important. Number one, if you look at the fact that, blacks, for an example, make up 16% of the population in America, and in commercial real estate make up like 3 to 5%, if even that. I mean, it's microscopic. So you're right. There's just not enough resources there or enough of us, if you will, in order for us to really get this done by ourselves. So we can't do it. The second thing you mentioned is that never expect to get these advantages just because of the color of your skin. Shouldn't have anything to do with it. You got where you were because you performed. And so at the end of the day, money is green. That's what people are interested in. And whoever can deliver the goods and perform is who they'll do business with. That is so correct. Be the best in your craft that you can be, perform and make things happen. And the whole sky can open up for you. So, it's been great. Theo, I greatly appreciate it. We're a little over time, but, we always get there. And, you've brought up a lot of very, very valuable insights. Appreciate that story on Hyundai. That's a very good one. To keep in mind, because there's a whole lot of money back there, behind that, but it wouldn't have happened if you didn't do the right thing. So certainly appreciate that. So thank you so much. Uriah, thank you for contributing as well. And to all of our listeners, we want to thank you. This is the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast with our special guest, Theo Bell. Theo, any concluding comments before we wrap up for today? Just, again, understanding money in this country is very important. I'm glad that you're having this type of podcast because it actually helps folks who don't have access understand a little bit more about how these deals work. So I really appreciate what you're doing here in your platform. Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, we certainly appreciate it, and feel free for all of you to tune in next week as we will continue the discussion about commercial real estate here in America. So thank you for that. You've been listening to Mornings with Joel, Commercial Real Estate Podcast, where we focus on rising stars and established players in commercial real estate and talk to them about how they are building legacies in today's marketplace.
Please check back weekly to hear our upcoming guests.